The old lighthouse stood like a giant white finger pointing at the gray sky. It had not worked for 23 years. The people of Sunset Harbor could remember when the bright light swept across the dark ocean every night. Ships would see the light and know they were safe. But now the lighthouse was dark and silent. Mrs. Patterson walked slowly past the lighthouse on her morning walk. She was 72 years old and had lived in Sunset Harbor her whole life. She remembered when her father took her to see the lighthouse. When she was a little girl, the big light would turn around and around all night long. It made a soft humming sound that made her feel safe. Now Mrs. Patterson felt sad when she looked at the lighthouse. The paint was peeling off the walls. Seagulls had made nests in the broken windows. Weeds grew all around the bottom of the building. It looked old and forgotten. The lighthouse was built in 1872. Back then, many ships sailed past Sunset Harbor. The rocks near the shore were dangerous. Ships needed the lighthouse to stay safe. For over 100 years, the lighthouse worked perfectly. Then one winter night in 2001, the light stopped working. It never worked again. The problem was inside the lighthouse. At the top was a huge glass lens. This lens was supposed to turn around slowly. When a bright light shone through the turning lens, it made a beam that could be seen for many miles. But the machine that made the lens turn was broken. Many people tried to fix the lighthouse. The first person was Mr. Rodriguez. He was an engineer who worked on big machines. He climbed up the narrow stairs to the top of the lighthouse. He looked at all the gears and wheels and parts. There were hundreds of pieces. Some were as big as car tires. Others were as small as coins. Mr. Rodriguez worked for 3 weeks. He took apart many pieces. He cleaned them and oiled them. He tried to make the machine work. But when he put everything back together, the lens still would not turn. He shook his head and told the town, "This machine is too old. It cannot be fixed." Next came Miss Kelly. She was a clockmaker who fixed old clocks and watches. The town thought maybe she could understand the lighthouse machine. It was like a giant clock with gears and springs. Miss Kelly spent 2 months studying the lighthouse. She brought special tools and books about old machines. Ms. Kelly found that many parts were rusted. Rust is what happens when metal gets wet and old. The rust made the gears stick together. She tried to clean off the rust, but there was too much. Some parts were so rusty they broke when she touched them. After 2 months, Miss Kelly gave up too. The town tried to find the original plans for the lighthouse. These plans would show exactly how the machine was built, but the plans were lost in a fire at the town hall in 1963. Without the plans, nobody knew exactly how all the parts fit together. More experts came to look at the lighthouse. There was Dr. Smith, who knew about old buildings. There was Mr. Lee, who fixed antique machines. There was even a team of college students who studied engineering. Every person said the same thing. The lighthouse could not be fixed. The broken lighthouse hurt the town in many ways. Ships used to stop at Sunset Harbor. The sailors would buy food and supplies. They would stay at the small hotels. They would eat at the restaurants. This brought money to the town, but without the lighthouse, ships stayed away. The rocks near the shore were too dangerous. Ship captains did not want to risk crashing, so they sailed to other towns instead. The town also lost tourists. People used to come to see the famous lighthouse. They would climb the stairs to the top. They would take pictures. They would buy souvenirs at the gift shop. Families would come for vacations. But a broken lighthouse was not interesting to tourists. Many businesses in Sunset Harbor started to close. First, the lighthouse gift shop shut down. Then the seafood restaurant near the dock closed. 3 small hotels stopped taking guests. The boat repair shop moved to another town. People began to leave Sunset Harbor to find work somewhere else. The town council met every month to talk about the lighthouse. The town council was a group of people who made decisions for the town. There was Mayor Johnson, who had been mayor for 10 years. There was Mrs. Green, who owned the grocery store. There was Captain Williams, who used to work on fishing boats. There were 7 people on the council total. Mayor Johnson always started the meetings the same way. "We need to talk about the lighthouse again," he would say. Then the council would argue about what to do. "We should tear it down," said Mr. Thompson, who owned the hardware store. "It costs too much money to keep fixing it. We could build something new instead." "No," said Mrs. Green. "The lighthouse is part of our history. My grandfather helped build it. We cannot just destroy it." Captain Williams always stayed quiet during these arguments. He was old enough to remember when the lighthouse worked. He knew how important it was for keeping ships safe. But he also knew that no one could fix it. The arguments went on for months. Some people wanted to tear down the lighthouse. Others wanted to keep trying to fix it. A few people suggested turning it into a museum, even if the light never worked again. But there was one big problem. The town did not have much money. Sunset Harbor was a small town with only 3,000 people. The broken lighthouse meant less money coming in from ships and tourists. The town could not afford to hire more experts. They could not afford to tear down the lighthouse. They could not even afford to paint it and make it look nice. As the months passed, more people gave up hope. The lighthouse had beaten every expert who tried to fix it. The machine inside was too complicated. Too many parts were broken or missing. It was like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle. When half the pieces were lost, young people in the town started leaving for college or jobs in big cities. They did not want to stay in a place that was slowly dying. The older people felt sad watching their town get smaller and quieter each year. Mrs. Patterson still took her morning walks past the lighthouse. But now she tried not to look at it too much. It reminded her of all the things the town had lost. She remembered when Sunset Harbor was busy and full of life. Now it felt empty and forgotten. The lighthouse stood silent against the gray sky, keeping its secrets locked inside. No one knew that soon everything would change. No one could imagine that the answer would come from someone who was not an expert at all. Someone who saw things differently than all the adults who had tried and failed. The impossible was about to become possible. Marcus Chun was 12 years old when his family moved to Sunset Harbor. His father, Dr. Chun, got a new job at the Marine Research Station. This was a place where scientists studied fish and ocean water. The family had lived in the big city. Before, moving to a small town was very different for Marcus. On his first day in Sunset Harbor, Marcus walked around to explore his new home. The town was much smaller than the city. There were no tall buildings or busy streets. Instead, there were small houses with white fences and yards full of flowers. The air smelled like salt water and fish. Marcus walked down to the harbor where the boats were tied up. He saw old fishing boats with nets hanging from their sides. Some smaller boats bobbed up and down in the water. But what caught his attention was the tall white tower at the end of the point. It was the lighthouse. Other kids his age were playing soccer in the park. They looked at Marcus but did not come over to talk. He was new and they did not know him yet. Marcus felt lonely. In the city he had many friends. Here he knew nobody. So Marcus walked toward the lighthouse by himself. As he got closer, he could see that it was very old. The white paint was chipped and fading. Some windows were broken. Tall grass grew around the bottom. It looked like nobody had taken care of it for a long time. There was a rusty chain across the door with a sign that said, "Danger, keep out." But the chain was loose. Marcus looked around to make sure nobody was watching. Then he squeezed through the gap and went inside. Inside the lighthouse was dark and dusty. Sunlight came through the broken windows and made bright squares on the floor. The air smelled musty, like old books. In the center was a spiral staircase that went up and up until Marcus could not see the top. Marcus had always loved climbing. In the city, he climbed trees in the park and jungle gyms at school. The lighthouse stairs looked like the biggest climbing challenge he had ever seen. He started going up, step by step. The stairs were made of iron and they made ringing sounds. When Marcus stepped on them, some steps were loose and wobbled. After climbing for what felt like a long time, Marcus reached the top. At the top was a round room with windows all around. In the center was the biggest, strangest machine Marcus had ever seen. It looked like a giant clock mixed with a telescope. There were huge gears with teeth like a monster's mouth. Thick chains hung down like snakes. In the middle was an enormous glass lens as big as a bicycle wheel. Marcus had never seen anything like it. He walked around the machine slowly, looking at every part. There were wheels and springs and levers everywhere. Some parts were shiny brass. Others were dull iron. Everything was covered with dust and spider webs. The machine was not moving at all. It looked frozen, like a movie that had been paused. Marcus tried to turn one of the smaller gears with his hand. It would not budge. He pushed harder, but nothing happened. The whole machine seemed stuck. Marcus sat down on the dusty floor and just looked at the machine. He wondered how it was supposed to work. In the city, his grandfather had taught him about clocks and watches. Grandfather Chun was from China and had learned to fix timepieces from his own father. Every summer, Marcus would visit his grandfather's small shop. The shop was full of ticking clocks and tiny watch parts. Grandfather Chun would show Marcus how gears worked together. "See, Marcus," his grandfather would say in his gentle voice. "Big gear turns little gear. Little gear turns other gears. All gears work together like a family." Grandfather Chun taught Marcus that fixing clocks required patience. "You cannot hurry," he would say. "First you watch. Then you understand. Then you fix." Marcus learned to sit very still and observe how each tiny part moved. Looking at the lighthouse machine, Marcus remembered his grandfather's lessons. This machine was much bigger than a clock, but it had gears just like the clocks in his grandfather's shop. Maybe the same rules applied. Marcus started coming to the lighthouse. Every day after school, he would squeeze through the loose chain and climb the long staircase. At the top, he would sit and study the machine. He brought a notebook and pencil from home and started drawing pictures of what he saw. The first drawings were simple. Marcus drew the big gears and the main parts. But as he looked more carefully, he saw smaller details. There were tiny gears hidden behind bigger ones. There were springs coiled up tight. There were chains that connected different parts of the machine. Each day, Marcus drew more details. His notebook filled up with pictures of gears and springs and levers. He drew the same parts from different angles. Sometimes he would find a part he had not noticed before. Then he would draw that too. Other kids at school thought Marcus was weird. During lunch, they would talk about video games and movies. Marcus would think about the lighthouse machine. When they played sports after school, Marcus would go to the lighthouse instead. "Why do you go to that creepy old place?" asked Jenny, a girl in his class. "It's just a broken building." Marcus did not know how to explain. The lighthouse did not feel creepy to him. It felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Every day he learned something new about the machine. Every day he understood a little bit more. His parents noticed that Marcus was spending a lot of time alone. His mother, Dr. Sarah Chun, worked at the hospital in the next town. She worried that Marcus was not making friends. "Maybe you should join the soccer team," she suggested one evening at dinner. "I don't really like soccer," Marcus said. "What do you like to do here?" His father asked. Marcus thought about telling them about the lighthouse, but he knew they would worry about him going into an old building alone. Adults always worried about safety. So he just said, "I like to explore." Marcus kept visiting the lighthouse every day. As the weeks passed, his drawings became more and more detailed. He started to see how different parts of the machine connected to each other. He began to understand the patterns. One afternoon, while drawing a complicated gear assembly, Marcus noticed something strange. There was a small lever that did not seem to connect to anything else. It was tucked behind a larger gear, almost hidden. Marcus had walked past it many times before noticing it. He drew the lever carefully in his notebook. Then he looked around to see if there were other hidden parts. Sure enough, he found more pieces that seemed separate from the main machine. There was a small wheel mounted on the wall. There were some thin cables that disappeared into holes in the floor. Marcus realized that maybe the lighthouse machine was not just one big machine. Maybe it was actually two machines. There was the big, obvious machine that everyone could see, But there might be a second hidden machine that nobody had noticed. This idea excited Marcus. All the experts who had tried to fix the lighthouse had focused on the big machine. What if they had missed something important? What if the answer was in the parts that were hidden? Marcus started paying special attention to these hidden pieces. He drew them all carefully. He tried to figure out how they might work together. It was like finding secret puzzle pieces that belonged to a different puzzle. As autumn turned to winter, Marcus spent even more time in the lighthouse. The days were getting shorter and colder, but inside the lighthouse, he felt warm with excitement. He was beginning to see something that no adult had seen. Marcus did not know it yet, but he was about to make a discovery that would change everything. The broken lighthouse was keeping its secrets, but Marcus was getting closer to understanding them. His patience and careful observation were about to pay off in a way that no one could imagine. The boy who loved puzzles was about to solve the biggest puzzle of all. Winter came to Sunset Harbor with cold winds and gray skies. Most people stayed inside their warm houses. But Marcus still climbed the lighthouse stairs every day after school. He brought a small flashlight because the days were getting shorter. In his notebook, Marcus had drawn over 200 pictures of the lighthouse machine. He had filled 3 notebooks completely. His drawings showed every gear, every spring, every chain, and every bolt. But most importantly, he had drawn all the hidden parts that other people had missed. Marcus was starting to understand something that the adult experts had not seen. They had all tried to fix the main machine. They focused on the big gears and the thick chains. They tried to force the stuck parts to move. But Marcus saw that this was not the right way. His grandfather had taught him an important lesson about fixing clocks. When clock is broken, Grandfather Chun used to say, do not force it. Forcing breaks more things. Instead, find the gentle way. Marcus remembered watching his grandfather fix an old clock that would not tick. The man who owned the clock had tried to force the gears to move. He had bent some parts and broken others. Grandfather Chun looked at the damage and shook his head. Sadly, see what happens when you rush, Grandfather Chun told Marcus. Now fixing is much harder. Instead of forcing the broken parts, Grandfather Chun had found a different way. He discovered that the clock had a backup spring that could make it work even when the main spring was broken. The backup spring was tiny and hidden, but it was enough to get the clock ticking again. Looking at the lighthouse machine, Marcus wondered if it had a backup system too. Maybe the builders had planned for the main machine to break someday. Maybe they had built a second way to make the light work. Marcus started studying the hidden parts more carefully. The small lever behind the big gear was connected to a thin cable. The cable went through a hole in the floor and disappeared. Marcus had never followed this cable to see where it went. One cold afternoon, Marcus decided to explore the lower parts of the lighthouse. He had always gone straight to the top before. Now he wanted to see what was on the other floors. The lighthouse had 5 floors connected by the spiral staircase. Each floor had a round room with windows. Marcus stopped at each floor and looked around carefully. Most of the rooms were empty except for dust and old seagull nests, but on the 3rd floor, Marcus found something interesting. There was a small door in the wall that he had never noticed before. The door was painted the same color as the wall, which made it hard to see. There was no handle, but Marcus could see the outline of the door. Marcus pushed on the door, and it opened with a loud creak. Behind the door was a narrow space filled with cables and pulleys. The cables were the same ones Marcus had seen disappearing through the floor upstairs. This was where they went. Marcus shined his flashlight into the space. The cables were connected to a series of pulleys and small gears. Everything was covered with thick dust and cobwebs, but unlike the main machine upstairs, these parts did not look rusted or broken. They just looked old and unused. Marcus squeezed into the narrow space to get a better look. The pulleys were mounted on a wooden frame attached to the lighthouse wall. The gears were smaller than the ones upstairs, but they looked like they might still work. At the bottom of the pulley system was a heavy weight made of iron. The weight was hanging on a thick chain. Marcus realized this was like the weights in his grandfather's old clocks. When the weight fell down slowly, it would turn the gears and make the clock work. Marcus felt excited. This looked like the backup system he had been hoping to find, but he needed to understand how it worked. He spent the next week studying the pulley system. He drew pictures of every part in his notebook. Slowly, Marcus figured out how the backup system was supposed to work. The heavy weight would fall down and turn the small gears. The gears would pull the cables. The cables would go up to the top floor and connect to the hidden parts of the main machine. Instead of trying to turn the huge stuck gears, the backup system would bypass them completely, but there was a problem. The backup system had been turned off somehow. Marcus could see that some of the cables had been disconnected. A few of the pulleys had been locked in place. It was like someone had deliberately disabled the backup system. Marcus wondered why someone would do this. Maybe when the main machine broke, the lighthouse keeper had tried to use the backup system. Maybe it had not worked properly, so he had shut it off. Or maybe he had forgotten it was there. Marcus knew he needed to be very careful. His grandfather had taught him that old machines could be dangerous. Always think before you touch, Grandfather Chun used to say. One wrong move can break everything. Marcus decided to start with the smallest, safest changes. He used a cloth to clean the dust off the pulleys. He found that some of them could turn freely once the dirt was removed. Others were still stuck, but gentle pressure could free them. Marcus brought tools from his father's workshop at home. He borrowed a small wrench, some oil, and a wire brush. He told his father he was working on a school project about old machines. This was not exactly a lie, but it was not the whole truth either. Every day after school, Marcus worked on the backup system. He cleaned each pulley carefully. He oiled the gears that seemed dry. He reconnected cables that had come loose. He worked slowly and patiently, just like his grandfather had taught him. The work was harder than Marcus had expected. Some parts were stuck with decades of grime. Others were tangled with thick cobwebs. Marcus had to clean everything with a small brush and lots of patience. Sometimes Marcus felt frustrated. The work was slow and difficult. His hands got dirty, and his back hurt from crawling around in the narrow space. But he remembered his grandfather's words about not rushing. Good work takes time, Grandfather Chun used to say. After 2 weeks of cleaning and oiling, Marcus thought the backup system might be ready to test. But he was nervous. What if something went wrong? What if he broke the machine even more? Marcus decided to test just one small part first. He found a pulley that seemed to be working well. He gently pulled on its cable to see if it would turn. The pulley moved smoothly and quietly. Marcus felt a thrill of excitement. Encouraged by this success, Marcus tested other parts of the backup system. Most of them worked once they were cleaned and oiled. The gears turned when he moved them by hand. The cables pulled smoothly through the pulleys. But Marcus still needed to figure out how to start the whole system. There had to be a way to release the heavy weight so it could fall and turn the gears. Marcus looked around the narrow space until he found what he was looking for. There was a small lever mounted on the wall. It was connected to a mechanism that held the weight in place. Marcus realized that pulling this lever would release the weight and start the backup system. Marcus put his hand on the lever but did not pull it yet. He wanted to make sure everything was ready. He checked all the connections one more time. He made sure the cables were properly attached. He verified that the pulleys could turn freely. Finally, Marcus felt ready to try. His heart was beating fast with excitement and nervousness. He took a deep breath and pulled the lever. There was a loud click as the weight was released. Then Marcus heard a rumbling sound as the heavy iron weight began to fall slowly down its chain. The gears started. Turning, the cables began to move. The backup system was working. Marcus quickly climbed the stairs to the top floor to see what was happening to the main machine. As he reached the top, he could hardly believe his eyes. For the first time in over 20 years, parts of the lighthouse machine were moving. The backup system was not turning the main gears. Instead, it was operating the hidden parts that Marcus had discovered. These parts were slowly rotating the huge glass lens by a completely different method. Marcus watched in amazement as the lens began to turn. It moved very slowly, but it was definitely moving. The backup system was working exactly as it was designed. to do over 150 years ago, but Marcus knew this was just the beginning. The lens was turning, but there was still no light. He needed to figure out how to make the lighthouse beam shine across the dark ocean. The hardest part of the puzzle was still ahead of him. Marcus stood at the top of the lighthouse watching the huge glass lens turn slowly. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The lens was made of hundreds of pieces of glass fitted together like a crystal puzzle. As it turned, it caught the afternoon sunlight and threw rainbows on the walls, but something was still missing. The lens was turning, but there was no bright light shining through it. Marcus needed to find the lamp that was supposed to go in the center of the lens. Without the lamp, the lighthouse was just a pretty glass decoration. Marcus looked around the top room more carefully. In the center of the lens was a metal stand, but it was empty. There should have been a bright light bulb or lamp there. Marcus searched everywhere, but could not find it. Then Marcus remembered something his father had told him about the Marine Research Station. They had old lighthouse equipment in their storage room. Maybe they had the missing lamp that evening. At dinner, Marcus asked his father about the lighthouse equipment. "Oh yes," Dr. Chun said. "We have boxes of old stuff from when the lighthouse was working. The previous lighthouse keeper donated it all when he retired." "Why do you ask?" Marcus tried to sound casual. "I'm just curious about how lighthouses work. It's for a school project." "Well, you can look at it if you want," his father said. "But be careful. Some of that equipment is very old and might be fragile." The next day, Marcus went to the Marine Research Station with his father. In the storage room, he found 3 boxes labeled lighthouse equipment. The boxes were heavy and covered with dust. Inside the first box, Marcus found lens cleaning supplies and instruction manuals. The second box had spare parts for the lighthouse machine. But in the third box, Marcus found exactly what he was looking for. Wrapped in old cloth was a special lighthouse lamp. It was not like a regular light bulb. It was bigger and had a strange shape. There was also a metal reflector that went behind the lamp to make the light brighter. Marcus asked his father if he could borrow the lamp for his school project. Dr. Chun agreed, but he warned Marcus to be very careful with it. "This lamp is probably worth a lot of money," his father said. "It's an antique. Don't break it." Marcus promised to be careful. He took the lamp home and studied it closely. He read the instruction manual that came with it. The manual was old and yellowed, but Marcus could still read most of it. The manual explained how the lighthouse was supposed to work. The lamp went in the center of the lens. When the lamp was lit, the lens would focus the light into a powerful beam. As the lens turned, the beam would sweep across the ocean like a giant flashlight. But there was one problem. The lighthouse lamp needed a special kind of power. It was not designed to plug into a regular electrical outlet. The manual said it needed something called a carbide gas generator. Marcus had never heard of carbide gas. He looked it up in the library and learned that it was a type of gas that burned very brightly. In the old days, lighthouse lamps used carbide gas instead of electricity. Marcus felt disappointed. Even if he could get the lens turning and install the lamp, he had no way to make carbide gas. The lighthouse would never work without the right kind of power. But then Marcus had an idea. What if he could use modern electricity instead of carbide gas? The important thing was to have a bright light in the center of the lens. Maybe he could find a way to make an electric light work. Marcus went back to the library and read everything he could about lighthouse lamps. He learned that some old lighthouses had been converted to use electric lights. The process was called electrification. Marcus found a book that explained how to convert old lighthouse lamps to use electricity. It was complicated, but it seemed possible. He would need some electrical parts and tools, Marcus asked his father, to help him with the electrical work. Dr. Chun was good with electronics because he used electrical equipment in his research. "This is a very ambitious school project," Dr. Chun said when Marcus showed him the lighthouse lamp. "Are you sure you want to try this?" Marcus nodded eagerly. He did not tell his father that he planned to put the lamp in the real lighthouse. He let his father think they were just making a demonstration model, working together. Marcus and his father converted the old lighthouse lamp to use modern electricity. They installed a powerful LED light bulb in place of the carbide gas burner. LED lights were much brighter and safer than old-fashioned bulbs. They also added a dimmer switch so Marcus could control how bright the light was. Dr. Chun helped Marcus wire everything properly and test it to make sure it was safe. When they turned on the converted lamp, it produced a brilliant white light. Even in the bright workshop, the light was almost too bright to look at directly. "Wow," Dr. Chun said. "This thing could probably be seen for miles," Marcus smiled. That was exactly what he was hoping for. The next day, Marcus carefully carried the converted lamp to the lighthouse. He was nervous about carrying such an important piece of equipment up the long spiral staircase. But he made it to the top without dropping anything. Marcus installed the lamp in the center of the turning lens. He had to run an extension cord down the stairs to plug it into an electrical outlet on the third floor. The lighthouse was old, but it did have some electrical power for basic lighting when everything was connected. Marcus took a deep breath and turned on the lamp. The effect was incredible. The bright light shone through the glass lens and was focused into a powerful beam. As the lens turned slowly, the beam swept around the room, but Marcus realized he had a problem. The lighthouse windows were dirty and covered with paint. The light beam could not shine through them properly. He needed to clean the windows if he wanted the light to be seen from outside. Marcus spent the next week cleaning the lighthouse windows. It was dangerous work because the windows were very high up. He had to be very careful not to fall. But gradually he cleaned away years of dirt and grime. When the windows were clean, Marcus tested the lighthouse again. This time, the bright beam shone clearly through the windows and out over the ocean. As the lens turned, the beam swept in a wide circle just like it was supposed to. Marcus felt incredibly proud. He had done something that no adult expert had been able to do. The lighthouse was working again, but Marcus realized that his work was not finished yet. The lighthouse was working, but nobody knew about it except him. He had been keeping his project secret because he was afraid adults would stop him. Now Marcus faced a difficult decision. Should he tell someone about what he had accomplished? What if people did not believe him? What if they were angry at him for going into the lighthouse without permission? Marcus thought about his grandfather's advice. "When you do good work," Grandfather Chun used to say, "do not hide it." Good work should help people. Marcus knew that the lighthouse could help the people of Sunset Harbor. It could bring back the ships and the tourists. It could help the town become prosperous again. But first, he had to find the courage to show people what he had done. Marcus decided to wait until evening when the lighthouse beam would be most visible. Then he would turn on the light and let the whole town see that their lighthouse was working. Again, as the sun began to set, Marcus climbed the lighthouse stairs one more time. His heart was pounding with excitement and nervousness. He was about to show the world that the impossible was possible. Marcus turned on the lighthouse lamp and watched the beam sweep across the darkening sky. For the first time in over 20 years, the Sunset Harbor Lighthouse was guiding ships safely home. The boy who loved puzzles had solved the biggest puzzle of all. The lighthouse beam swept across the dark ocean like a giant arm welcoming ships home. Marcus stood at the top of the lighthouse, watching his creation work perfectly. The bright light made a complete circle every 30 seconds, just like the old lighthouse had done many years ago. Down in the town, people were starting to notice the light. Mrs. Patterson was washing dishes in her kitchen. When she saw a bright flash through her window, she looked outside and gasped. The lighthouse was working. "Harold," she called to her husband, "come quick. Look at the lighthouse." Harold Patterson came running to the window. He could not believe what he saw. The lighthouse beam was sweeping across the harbor just like it had when he was a boy. "How is this possible?" Harold asked. "Nobody has been able to fix that thing for over 20 years. Mrs. Patterson felt tears in her eyes. She had thought she would never see the lighthouse working again. Now it was more beautiful than she remembered. Other people in the town were noticing the light too. Mayor Johnson was reading in his living room when the bright beam flashed through his window. He jumped up and ran outside to get a better look. "Martha," he called to his wife, The lighthouse is working. Someone fixed the lighthouse. Soon people were coming out of their houses all over town. They stood in their yards and on the beach, pointing at the lighthouse and talking excitedly. Children ran around laughing. Adults hugged each other and cried happy tears. Captain Williams was on his fishing boat when he saw the light. He had been fishing in the harbor when night fell. He was about to head back to shore when the lighthouse beam suddenly appeared. Captain Williams felt his heart jump. He had been hoping to see this light again for over 20 years. Now it was sweeping across the water, showing him the way home. Just like it used to do, the lighthouse beam was visible for many miles. Ships far out at sea could see it clearly. For the first time in decades, ship captains knew exactly where Sunset Harbor was located. A cargo ship called the Sea Princess was sailing past the coast when the captain saw the lighthouse beam. He had not planned to stop at Sunset Harbor because it was dangerous to enter the harbor without a lighthouse. But now he could see the light clearly. "Change course," the captain told his crew. "We're going to Sunset Harbor." I haven't seen that lighthouse working in 20 years. Back on land, people were trying to figure out who had fixed the lighthouse. The town council members were calling each other on the phone. "Did you hire someone to fix the lighthouse?" Mayor Johnson asked Mrs. Green. "No," she replied. "I thought you did it." "Not me," said the mayor. "This is a mystery." Marcus could hear the excitement in the town below. He felt proud but also nervous. He knew that soon people would want to know who had fixed the lighthouse. He would have to tell them the truth. Marcus climbed down the lighthouse stairs and walked toward town. As he got closer, he could see crowds of people gathered on the beach. Everyone was looking at the lighthouse and talking loudly. Marcus took a deep breath and walked up to Mayor Johnson. "Excuse me," Marcus said quietly. Mayor Johnson was too excited to pay attention to a 12-year-old boy. He kept talking to the other adults about the lighthouse. "Excuse me," Marcus said louder. "I need to tell you something about the lighthouse." This time Mayor Johnson looked down at Marcus. "What is it, son?" "I fixed it," Marcus said. Mayor Johnson laughed. "That's very funny, son, but this is serious. We need to find out who really fixed our lighthouse." "I really did fix it," Marcus said. "I can show you how." Mrs. Green overheard and came over. "What's this boy saying?" "He says he fixed the lighthouse," Mayor Johnson said, still smiling like it was a joke. More people gathered around to listen. Marcus felt scared with so many adults looking at him. But he knew he had to tell the truth. "I've been working on it for 3 months, Marcus said. "I found a backup system that nobody knew about. I cleaned it and fixed it and got it working." Again, the adults looked at each other. They were not sure if they should believe a 12-year-old boy. "Son," Captain Williams said kindly, "many smart adults have tried to fix that lighthouse. Engineers and clockmakers and all kinds of experts. They all said it was impossible." "I know," Marcus said. "But they were all trying to fix the main machine. I used the backup system instead." "What backup system?" asked Mrs. Green. Marcus tried to explain about the hidden pulleys and cables and the heavy weight. But it was hard to make the adults understand. They kept asking questions that Marcus did not know how to answer. Finally, Dr. Chun arrived. He had heard about the lighthouse from his neighbors and came to see what was happening. "Marcus!" Dr. Chun called out. "What are you doing here?" "Dad," Marcus said, feeling relieved to see a familiar face. "I need to tell you something important." Marcus explained to his father about the lighthouse project. He told him about the backup system and the converted lamp and all the work he had done. Dr. Chen listened carefully without interrupting. "Is this true?" Dr. Chun asked when Marcus finished. "Yes," Marcus said. "I can show you." Dr. Chun looked at the other adults. "My son is very good with mechanical things. His grandfather taught him about gears and clockwork. If he says he fixed the lighthouse, I believe him. But how could a boy do something that professional engineers could not do?" asked Mayor Johnson. "Maybe," Dr. Chin said, "he saw something they missed." The adults decided to follow Marcus to the lighthouse. They wanted to see his work for themselves. Marcus led them through the loose chain and up the spiral staircase. Atop Marcus showed them the turning lens and the converted lamp. He explained how the backup system worked. He took them down to the third floor and showed them the hidden pulleys and cables. The adults were amazed. They had walked past these hidden parts many times, but they had never noticed them. Marcus had discovered something that had been there all along. "This is incredible," said Mrs. Green. "You really did it? How did you know to look for a backup system?" asked Mayor Johnson. Marcus told them about his grandfather's lessons. He explained how his grandfather had taught him to look for gentle solutions instead of forcing things. He showed them his notebooks full of drawings and observations. The adults realized that Marcus had approached the problem completely differently than the experts. Instead of trying to fix the broken parts, he had found a way around them. Instead of using force, he had used patience and careful observation. Word spread quickly through the town. People came to see the lighthouse working and to meet the boy who had fixed it. Local newspapers heard about the story and sent reporters to interview Marcus. "How does it feel to solve a problem that stumped so many experts?" asked a reporter. Marcus thought carefully before answering. "I think maybe the experts were too focused on the big obvious parts. Sometimes the answer is in the small hidden parts that people don't notice." The story of Marcus and the lighthouse appeared in newspapers across the country. People were amazed that a 12-year-old boy had succeeded where adult professionals had failed. Engineers came to study Marcus's solution. They were impressed by the backup system and wondered why they had not seen it before. Some admitted that they had been too quick to focus on the main machine without looking for alternatives. The working lighthouse began to change Sunset Harbor. Immediately, ships started stopping at the harbor again. The sea captains felt safe entering the harbor with the lighthouse beam to guide them. Tourists began visiting the town to see the famous lighthouse and meet the boy who had fixed it. The gift shop reopened. The restaurants started serving customers. Again, the small hotels filled up with visitors. Marcus became a local hero. But he remained humble about his achievement. He always gave credit to his grandfather for teaching him about patience and observation. "My grandfather used to say that every problem has a solution," Marcus told a television interviewer. "You just have to be willing to look for it in places where others haven't looked." The lighthouse continued to work perfectly night after night. The backup system that Marcus had restored was actually more reliable than the original main system. It required less maintenance and was easier to repair. Marcus started a club at school to teach other kids about mechanical problem solving. He showed them how to observe carefully and think creatively about solutions. The club became very popular years later. When Marcus was older, he would become a famous engineer. He would design bridges and buildings and machines. But he would always remember the lighthouse as his first great achievement. The lighthouse still stands today, sending its bright beam across the ocean every night. Ships still use it to find their way safely to harbor. And in the town of Sunset Harbor, people still tell the story of the 12-year-old boy who accomplished the impossible. Marcus proved that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places. He showed that patience and careful observation can be more powerful than force and expertise. Most importantly, he demonstrated that age and experience are not the only things that matter when solving difficult problems. The lighthouse beam continues to sweep across the dark ocean, a reminder that the impossible can become possible when someone is willing to see things differently. And in Sunset Harbor, the boy who loved puzzles will always be remembered as the one who solved the greatest puzzle of all.